Chicago and was working with a home counselor who could have been my grandmother. I mean, she was significantly older than I, well, maybe not significantly older than me, but she certainly had a lot more life experience than I had. And we were down in, let's see, where were we now? We were in, I'm not going to remember the name of the place we were in. We were in South Chicago, basically. And before we went there, I did a little research and found out that this is one of those parts of South Chicago that you really don't want to go to. Apparently there are some that aren't as bad. This one wasn't one of those. So we're down there 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and we're sitting in this little nonprofit office, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get back to my hotel? And we had this young guy come in, and he had explained that his lender had not told him that they didn't escrow taxes. And so all of a sudden he got this huge tax bill at the end of the year and he couldn't pay it. And so we had run a credit report on him, we were going through his information, and he literally was down to his last $100 a month. And there was no money for this tax bill. And at least as I was looking through it. And what surprised me about this particular interaction is everybody else that we had met with, the counselor had been interjecting some suggestions and encouragement to the borrower who was sitting there. And Norma was this lady's name. She's sitting there next to this guy like this, just looking at the floor. Totally different than her demeanor had been with all the other people that had come in. And we had had some pretty tough situations. So I couldn't quite figure out what was going on here. And then I got into his credit report and I saw his car payment. At a $1,350 car payment. And my first thought was, is this for you and your wife and your mom or something? And it was to BMW, and I thought, oh, okay. Well, I found myself in kind of a tough situation because as a representative of the investor that held his loan, I'm not really in a good place to say, you know what, you should sell your car and then your problems are solved, because that's very self-serving if you work for Fannie Mae. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, and I don't remember his name, but I said, you know, I'm looking at your situation and I'm just not sure if there's anything that we can really do for you at this point. And Norma's still sitting there not saying a word. And I'm really hoping that she's going to say something here pretty soon, but she had seen the credit before I had. And finally, she unfolds her arms and she puts her hand on his shoulder and she says, son, the problem is your car. And she says, have you received a foreclosure notice yet? He said, no. And she said, well, just because you don't have it doesn't mean it's not coming. And this guy was like 28 years old. And she says, you are too young to have a foreclosure on your record. And so we're going to get to, this was Friday night. She said, I want you to come in on Monday and we're going to talk about what you need to do to get your situation straightened out. Because you don't want to lose a house at this point in your life. You ruin your credit at 28 years old and there's no reason for that. And she said, we see a lot of young guys like you that make a little money and they decide they want to have this nice car and all sense goes out the window and here you are. So they start to work out the final paperwork and at this point I'm out in the lobby waiting to get in the rent car and go back to the hotel. And there's another counselor there that we had worked with during the day. And now the counselor and the manager of this facility, they've been around the block long enough that they kind of know, they kind of see you coming if you come in a situation like this young man had. And so the lady that's sitting there, she says, and I can't recall her name, but she said, so did Norma get out her tape measure? And I said, excuse me? I don't know enough about how this stuff works to have any idea where this is going. And so she said, well, her tape measure. And she said, Norma keeps a tape measure in her desk. And when these young people come in and they've got these fancy cars, one of the things that she'll normally tell them is, we need to go measure the windows in your car. And they'll say, well, what do you want to do that for? Because you're going to be living in it. So the good news about that is there are some people out there with some real common sense that are really trying to make a difference and hopefully help some of the people who've made some unfortunate decisions that they can reasonably get out of without depending upon the government to bail them out. And this guy wasn't going to qualify for any of the programs that we had. At some point we would have had to say, you know what, you don't get to have a BMW and a home modification program. But I do want to, just before we close down, I do have this. If you don't take anything else up here, I've got lots of paperwork up here that you're certainly welcome to have. And always give this out with the qualification that this is for your friend, this is for the guy that cuts your yard. It doesn't have to be for you. So if you walk up here, you don't have to tell me this is for my sister who lives in Florida and she has to live in the house. That's cool. I believe it when you tell me that. You don't have to tell me your situation. If you are in that situation and you do want to call somebody, you want to be put in touch with a local counselor, I'm happy to do that. My business card's up here. Let me know how we can help. I would encourage you. These are really cool. These are from the Treasury. Really pretty full color documents. This is where some of your tax dollars are going. I don't know how helpful these are. This one is from their website and has a lot more information. It's a Q&A section. And this one is the one that I really would encourage you to take. It's the one that has all the websites on it, how to get in touch with all the different organizations, how to find out if you have a Fannie Mae loan or a Freddie Mac loan. Yes, ma'am.
This is going to sound horribly unsympathetic, but banker's daughter, sorry.
Sure.
What is going to prevent us 5 years down the road from getting in the same situation where you've got right now a lot of unqualified home buyers back in the market just simply for the $8,000 tax credit?
I don't have an official answer for you. I think from a personal perspective, I think that's a very real concern. And I don't know that we have really thought that through. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the situations that are coming out now are specific to the situation today. But yeah, I think that there is some possibility for a second wave. Now, the one thing I will say is I do think that if you've been out looking for a mortgage right now, it is much more difficult to qualify for a mortgage today. But the thing that concerns me a little bit is I graduated from college in '89, and at that time they were talking about these negative amortization loans that the FHA had come out with, that they weren't going to be running anymore. What a dumb idea that was. And so we started talking about these interest-only loans today and these low interest rate amortized loans that didn't have this ridiculous upside. I couldn't help but thinking, isn't that kind of like what we did back in the 80s? So, what's it been now, 30 years? Maybe it'll at least take us 30 years before we do this again. But I think that unfortunately what happens is you get comfortable, the economy starts doing well, and you start to forget how difficult this kind of cycle is. So I wish I could tell you that I know we're smarter than that, and we're going to learn from this, and we're not going to let this happen again. I just don't know if I can make that statement confidently.
David?
Yeah.
Well, at least maybe inflation that we're headed for is going to bail everybody out of it, right? I had 3 comments. Number one, thank you. I had the benefit of being over at Fannie Mae with David, and you've just got a great group of people over there. Wonderful culture, and y'all have been going through the ringers, so thank you for all you do in the background. The other thing is, I think, I'll get to my last comment last, there's a great opportunity that instead of staffing up all these institutions, Citi and Bank of America, great entrepreneurial opportunity if someone would develop a company that would do just that, and they could outsource that to a company. They wouldn't have to staff up.
There are actually some that are doing that.
Yeah, that'd be great. But the last one is, and you mentioned this, said something about this, these balloons. Now, it's been talked about now that recently that there were 2, 3, and 5 year adjustable rate mortgages.
Right.
That there's a huge wave coming in 2010 of these 5 year. That's when the 5 years will hit.
Right.
How big, given the other mortgage issues we had relative to 100% of the mortgages that went south, how big is the 5 year that's going to hit in 2010? 20% of it, 30% of the problem, or?
You know, that's a really good question, and was actually at a Federal Reserve meeting a few months ago, and I don't really understand why we're in this circumstance, but the way the Federal Reserve explained it is a lot of the private label mortgage companies that are